I was in my own session today with Michelle, and it, one thing that came out was how I have some memories of being younger and I remember things or events, but it's not a felt sense of being younger. And that's what, for a variety of reasons, I'm sure, has been darkened or dampened or diminished. Right. And this is the kind of the bringing into the light, the healing, the reconnecting. In the session I did with my client today that I was speaking about, she had a memory from when she was 6 years old and, was abused that she never had before. And it spoke to me to a vibrancy and a readiness and an openness, right? Because she had her adolescent part, which is kind of like her "don't fuck with me" rage. That I'm the one. That part was present, and that's who was protecting this younger memory. Yeah. That was not going to allow access to that younger memory. So we kind of hung out a little bit with this energy of this, adolescent part, just to being with it, not trying to convince it of anything. And then it gave access, right? It gave access because she was saying the younger part wanted to, but just, and that's just amazing to me. Um, to have this kind of a awakening, beginning, openness. And I mean, it's scary as hell because you're walking into remembering the terror, the fear. But in doing that, you're also beginning the release. How did I get started on that?
Connection with the younger parts,
yeah.
And the story of the child, youngest child, sneaking into the nursery, and the parents hear on the baby monitor the little girl asking her baby sister, "Remind me of what God is, because I'm beginning to forget." There's an forgetting and a disconnection that you're talking about to that younger, and I think we're trained to do it. I think I touched on this last week, but as a young man, I, in ways, try to put away foolish things. We're taught to do that, right? And I still had the playful, side, but it was not as integrated, I think, as it is now. And I felt the responsibility, right? I felt I needed to be mature, and it was. I'm glad to have recovered that, and see the value of all my parts. And Bob, what you were describing, the disconnect, to me is like, instead of experiencing something, we're being told about it, right? Sort of like secondhand. And what we need, I think, what through integration is the experience. My experience of my, 6-year-old, 16-year-old, and 50.
And this is like, it reminds me of some of our sessions, Michael, because this came out of me today, but it reminds me of, at times when we were working together, I would pause and ask you, kind of acknowledge your observer, your reflector.
Yeah.
And say, okay, can that part be here and just sit with us, and then can you drop down?
Yeah.
And in the session today, I was struggling with that. I was wanting to let go of the observer, but the observer part was, and it was this, okay, I want to let go into it. And it's like this back and forth, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that observer part, which has its place, of course, but that's distancing,
Mm-hmm.
And I think so often when we talk about things that maybe we're uncomfortable with them. I don't know but we do try to distance ourselves from them, from parts of us, from aspects of of who we are. This life is fucking phenomenal. I mean, that we are here and that we can experience what we're experiencing, and we can learn and grow and evolve and um, just be is what a gift. What a gift this is. And I don't think I've ever once been my full best self, but I'm still, I want to be, and I want to evolve and grow and become. And I do think we've touched on some things that make that possible if we will do what she's saying: grow, connect, adapt, and give. And earlier I was saying question everything. And I, Bob, and others, but primarily Bob, convinced me of the paradigm of IFS to describe what goes on within us. And and I believe that, and I definitely see myself as certain things. But because of that, this week I listened to two teachings that says self is an illusion, and they went step by step. Sam Harris and his wife, sorry I forget her name at the moment, but did in-depth teachings of why the self is an illusion. I want to that didn't it didn't change, I think it informed some things, I think, and I'm open to it informing more, but I do want to remain open and question everything I think or believe.
I look for translations, and this is kind of where I started with don't go gently into the night and passively into the night. And when what I think, what there is no self, is there's no ego.
Yeah.
I don't think it's what I think that self in the self we allude to or point a direction towards when we're talking about that self that is trans uh, beyond in IFS. That's different than that. That's different. Same word, but not same word.
Yeah. And as in all things, you have science and you have, say, religion or art, poetry, whatever you want to call it. But so often they are speaking of the same thing. And so when they were describing consciousness and the illusion of self, they were talking about that which is distancing of connection, of being connected to all things. And so if you see yourself as a self and not part of the whole, and he even said in meditation and spiritual practices, and he's an atheist, but that you can experience that oneness with everything, that is a connection, that is a dissolving of ego or dissolving of self, because you're so connected to everything. Are you experiencing that? Could we take just a moment to in our closing, sort of wrapping things up, if anybody would be willing to share some ways in which you think you are aging well, practicing some of these things, and maybe some challenges and ways in which you would like to improve the way you are aging. And I'll start because I'm not asking you to say something I'm not willing to. Um, I've touched on a few of the ways in which I feel like I'm doing pretty well at aging. I am staying active. I think I am open. Um, I think I have the exercise and some of those things. Um, I don't think I am doing well with my diet. I think that's probably the weakest part of my um, aging process that I'm aware of. There may be others that are even more so, but I often look at my weight more so than just my health. And so if I feel like I'm putting on a few pounds and I want to take a few pounds off, I may make adjustments, but that's not the same as having a balanced diet, as having, getting the things I need. And I'm a guilty of taking shortcuts. And one of the ways, I do it in a lot of ways. Primarily, I would say the number one way I do it, and I don't even see it as necessarily a horrible, terrible, bad thing, but I try to pack too much in. So I try to multitask or do too many things, and I'll take a shortcut to try to do that. One of my shortcuts with nutrition is supplements. And for decades now, I've taken a ton of supplements. I mean, a ton. And I know they don't replace the actual vegetables and better diet I could be having. And so that's one of the things that I know I need to work on. And I hope I can. I mentioned to Jasmine just this week about she made some phenomenal squash and onion that was just so good. And I was like, let's incorporate more of this into our meals, and more salad, um, and we're attempting to do that. I think probably all of y'all do it far better than I do, but I'm aware of it, and I want to do better with it.
Process is a word that came to my mind a few times as we've been talking. And I remember my friend Jim, that was a minister who I lived with for a period of time in my early 20s, that really helped reconnect me to hope in my darkest times. One of the things one of the things he said to me over and over again, Bob, it's a process. Bob, it's a process. And that's maybe one of the closest words I would have to maybe faith, or what I hope to have faith in, is that is staying engaged in the process to the best of my ability, with some guidance and direction, and openness and humility and all those things. So that's something I hope and intend to continue, while I still, like Michael, have a number of areas of my life that, yeah. So
Everything is process, absolutely everything. And as much as I've always talked about that and see that in my work and my life and everything, um, I've never quite equated it with faith. I really like that. I like that connection to faith in the process. Trust the journey, right? It's trust the unfolding.
Dude, the big thing I've seen is I'm very impulsive, and that can be a good thing and a bad thing. Like when you're impulsive and you're like, oh, I'm just going to go to the playground down here. Or I'm going to go out on a boat with a friend at a spur of a moment, or I'm going to go on a road trip. Like that's fun and that keeps. But then diet and exercise, I'm very impulsive with that. I'll do it, but I lack consistency. So putting some consistency with stuff like you were talking, I think is one of those things I really need to do because I don't know that I have consistency with anything, and that's a good and a bad thing.
Yeah.
But the other thing I'd noticed is like, I kind of got a reset in 2021 and everything was new again. Like everything was new again because I was doing it from a completely new perspective on life. And, in just 4 short years, I feel like I've done so much stuff. But, some of the stuff, you don't like anymore. You don't work. So that you start to lose your options start to limit down because you've ruled out some stuff. And I got involved in a bunch of stuff, and y'all know my schedule. It's pretty rigid now. So I've lost a lot of that flexibility. So I can't just do the impulsive fun stuff. And I think that's one of the things I'm trying to undo is kind of like I got to where I pretty much had something scheduled every single day. And I'm trying to back that off and get some days back where I can just have a day and just go do whatever. Because I think that happens to everybody. You get in the rut with work and kids and family and all this stuff where you've got this fixed schedule. I get up at this time. I go this time. I come home at this time. I eat at this time. I go to bed. Like, I think trying to build some of that flexibility back into my life is what I'm trying to, because I can see it diminishing my youthful exuberance because I'm just tired. I can't do this fun thing that I want to do because I've got to do this other thing that I'm committed to. And I
so what for you, Jennifer, is the difference between impulsive and spontaneous?
I think impulsivity is probably at the key of it because I see how I eat and how I exercise and how I do some things that are not good for me. So spontaneous is what it looks like, but for me, it's probably impulsivity under the root of it. But I guess spontaneity is a good word for it. Maybe that's the good side of impulsiveness.
I do think it has a much more positive. I can be impulsive also. And I was thinking about the way I primarily, with my schedule, I have a certain openness outside of my writing that allows for spontaneity, allows for an unfolding, and has the rigid, and what you're describing, I think, is you can't really be spontaneous if there's not space. If
Right.
everything is rigid, if everything's filled and there's no space, how can we be spontaneous?
And I can tell you just because I can see it in my life, that leads to you getting a little more lethargic and not having as much fun and stuff like that. So I had a completely open schedule there for a while, and I can see as I've gotten more rigid in it, it's kind of slowed me down and then taken away some of that wonder. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I want to get that back. So I think being mindful of stuff like that is getting you into a rut also helps you, stay focused on that youthful exuberance that we're talking about, the vitality.
I think of spontaneous is free and impulsive is driven.
Yeah.
I can't tell the difference a lot of the time. Or I rationalize that I can.
I like that though.
I was going to say, I think impulsivity lacks the thought and reasoning or whatever approach of spontaneity. Spontaneity is a choice, a decision. Impulsivity can be not. It can be, well, what the fuck did I just do? It's like I didn't realize I was, less controlled. Or
we bought that pool, and I believe that was spontaneous. Even though we weren't planning on it in the moment, they had them on clearance at Walmart, and we both got kind of excited about it, and we did. I think that was spontaneous. So I'm sticking to that.
Yes. So an example of what I was talking about with schedule and openness and all, and Jasmine, in our relationship over the last coming up on 3 years, I guess, or 2.5 years, whatever it is. I'm sure she's had to makes adjustments to my approach to this, just with scheduling. And so, like last weekend or end of last week, I think I mentioned to her, it's like, hey, there's a couple of movies out I'd like to see that I think now crowds have died down because they've been out long enough. If we can figure a time, I'd like to see them next week, or I'd start the process, maybe see one next week. And look at the days and whatever. And then so I asked her, I think day before yesterday, I mentioned, well, what about Wednesday night, since we're not doing the podcast? And so it was a maybe for several days, and then it was like, okay, Wednesday night will work. Will that work for you? What time's better, 5:25 or 8:25? And I don't see that as completely spontaneous, but I do think it's on the spectrum of spontaneity because it was not fixed until it was. And so I do think there has to be a certain amount of openness, which Jasmine has, to this kind. And she has a much more rigid schedule than I do. But I think we make it work, and I think part of it is because of her openness and willing to flow with the non-scheduled time.
It's interesting that you use that example, because when you asked, how are we aging well, or what areas we need to improve, I was thinking, kind of a little bit hard put to. I was thinking, what am I doing well or not doing as well? And I think, and you had mentioned earlier, Michael, about retaining a certain innocence and things, and I think particularly the last handful of years that I've really worked on being completely healthy, and really I used to joke around that there must be something I was meant to learn, because I am a low maintenance personality. I like to shower and go. I don't want to have 8 products for my hair. I don't want to spend an hour doing it. And then I've got this, not just curly, but highly sensitive, special needs hair. And
call it what it is.
And when Michael,
best hair ever.
And when Michael and I started connecting and spending more time together, he commented on my self-care. And I think that's one of the things that has been a form of self-care for me, is that openness. Before, when I went on vacation, like I had pretty much had a spreadsheet, called it an itinerary, but it's basically a to-do list. Like, we're going to do this, and didn't really just let the day unfold. When we're eating breakfast, I mean, I went as a newlywed a couple of decades ago, last century in the 90s, a group of like 11 of us, it was 9 adults, 2 or 3 kids, went and stayed at a timeshare and did the Orlando thing, Disney and different stuff. And I mean, I had spreadsheets, I had the meals planned down to serving sizes and a budget, and everything had to go by a specific time. And because I used to have the philosophy that the more carefully you plan something, the more likely it is to go as planned, which is true. But then part of the answer in that is that things don't always go as planned. And I think one of the things I'm doing better is not just planning the moment, being able to let go and enjoy the moment, and to be okay with, if I choose to, stop, make an extra stop on the way home, I might miss an opportunity for pickleball with Michael, and that's okay. It's not not making it, just enjoying that this is what the day brought us. And each day there's so much good that's brought, even on the hardest days, that I think learning to really be that balance of not worrying so much for the future, and not letting those worries usurp the joy of the present. Because I think that's part of, it helps keep us. Today I was at a training, and somebody made the comment, I hadn't seen her since Joel's 17, he's probably 4 or 5, so 13ish years, and she said, oh my goodness, you just never changed. And I thought, I'm so much physically has changed, but I think the core of who I am, and some of that, maybe the youthfulness, the vitality, had she seen me 5 or 6 years ago, I think she would have remarked how much I had changed, because it's so much had been closed off, and I was so much in a survival mode. And I remember at one point saying to a friend that I worked with at the hospital that someday I'm going to share with other people how I went from just surviving to thriving. Like, that's my goal. I don't know how. I don't have the steps. I don't have the objectives and the tasks like I'm used to laying out in this, comprehensive strategic plan. But I just know that's the goal, and I feel like I get closer and closer to that. And I think if each of us can find the ways that we thrive, then I think that probably is, to me, one of the best ways we can age, right? To enjoy, get the most out of every minute, which is so much more than a cliche.